Boardroom Bound, episode 184, Following Your Passion Into the Boardroom, with Vipe Desi.
I think it's, kind of cliche to somewhat say that it's like, follow your passion. But in all honesty, I think that's very true. If you follow your passion and you love what you do, it doesn't feel like work. You want to pour your heart and your soul and your mind into it. And when you're around people that are doing the same thing, it's contagious. It's infectious.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of Boardroom Bound. My name is Alexander Lowry, and this is the podcast dedicated to intentional leadership in the boardroom. My goal is to give aspiring and existing directors the tips, tactics, and strategies necessary to transform your confidence and build a successful career as a board director. Quick reminder, you can get all of today's show notes at podcast.gordon.edu. And in today's episode, we're speaking with Vipe Desi. Vipe is someone who has followed what he is passionate about. He is a surfer. He's all about the ocean and the planet and conservation, and used his branding and marketing skill set to help organizations, starting with nonprofits. And because he was bringing his A game by in a space that he loved, the skill set he had, it naturally opened up doors for him to get into for-profit organizations. Companies were finding him and bringing him based on the network that he had built. And he's going to share that approach with us today, and you will hear what he's passionate about, how it comes out. And it's a great example for all of us to be able to follow as we think about what path might lead us into the boardroom. Before we jump into today's show, I'd like to share a message from our sponsor about board director education and certification. Want to join your first board or looking for additional board seat opportunities? In either scenario, be sure to be disciplined in your approach through the Becoming an Exceptional Board Director Candidate Education and Certification course. Get both the Modern Board Director Candidate Packaging and Modern Board Operations Knowledge integrated with one program. Remember, the key to landing additional or your first board seat is in your packaging. Make the effort to do it right. Program graduates also receive their globally recognized International Board Director Competency Designation upon course completion, available in one-on-one, group, or on-demand registration options. You can learn more at bit.ly, that's bit.ly/IBDC-D. So bit.ly/IBDC-D. And now, let's jump into the show. Vipe Desi, welcome to the Boardroom Bound podcast.
Alexander, thank you so much for having me. Look, I've really enjoyed the shows that you've put out with your guests, and I think, as they say in the radio world, long-time listener, first-time caller.
Well, thank you. We love our fans, and you and I have gone back and forth, and so many good conversations about some of the past episodes have been helpful, but also about how your story will be helpful for our audience. And we've heard lots of different journeys and paths laid out in this show of different people saying, do this, don't do that, etc. And you and I were joking before the show started that yours is not the typical one, but I don't think it's atypical either in some of the best practices and the way that it's gone about. So I'm excited to share that today, but let's give a little bit of background experience for our audience, because if someone were to pull up your LinkedIn profile, it looks like this is incredible, all the stuff that you're doing, but this happened over a long period of time and how it got built up. So, you've got a really fascinating story about how some of this begins and the fact that you were involved early on in the inspiration for the X Games and launching Red Bull in the US, and how some of that will tie into what you're doing later in your story that we'll talk about. So maybe you could set the scene for us.
Yeah, thanks, Alexander. Look, I would say that my career started out by accident. I am just a simple surfer. I just wanted to spend time in the water, but after graduating from college, I found myself the owner of a surf shop, and I really had a great time experiencing retail. And I learned a lot, but I also discovered that I had this knack and passion for marketing and branding, and I was able to use my retail store as a launching pad. But we created an event, and that event went on to inspire the creation of the X Games and the Warp Tour, and I had brands coming to me wanting me to consult for them on what trends were happening at the consumer level. And after that, after my surf shop, I decided that I would start a youth marketing agency. And I just saw that there was a lot of corporate interest in action sports and this youth movement that was starting out in the 90s. And our first client was a little beverage company out of Austria called Red Bull. So we were tasked to help launch the brand here in the U.S., and the rest is kind of history with that brand. But it's also where, at my agency, I came into contact with the Surfrider Foundation, and they asked me to do some pro bono work for them, which I was excited to do. I got to learn about the mission of the organization. I got to work with the staff. I got to meet some of the board members. And after a couple of years, they invited me to join their board, and it was the first board that I joined. But I had no idea what I was in for, what to expect. There was no formal training or understanding. It was just like, welcome to our board. Here's our book, and it's 2.5, 3 days of board meetings and strategizing and talking about the mission and where we're headed. And that really opened up the doors for me of meeting incredible people in the boardroom, understanding how they were thinking and the way that they were thinking. It awoke something in me as well, and I just loved the engagement and what it felt like to be in the boardroom strategizing these big ideas, but then also seeing them play out and come to fruition. And, I remember one time, shortly after being on the board of Surfrider, we had been working on some initiatives at the board and executive level, and somebody came up to me and said, "Have you seen what Surfrider's doing? It's a really cool initiative." And in my mind, I'm like, we've been talking about this for a year. This is so great that somebody is saying how they really enjoy it and they like it and so forth. But after that, I just kept joining nonprofit boards, helping them out in numerous ways, learning about governance and development and board interaction and what my role was in helping staff succeed. It helped me to grow personally and professionally. And a few years later, one of the gentlemen that I had actually served on that first board, nonprofit board at Surfrider Foundation, was starting a new company in the commercial real estate industry and reached out and felt that I would be a great addition to their board. And that was my first corporate board appointment at richuncles.com, and the rest is kind of history.
So I think there's some really good lessons I'd love to touch upon here. And I know that you are passionate about the ocean, and you've got several organizations related to that. And you could hear that in your story. I was just a surfer. I opened up a surf shop. This all seems normal and natural. So you were working with organizations, volunteering your time and your talents for stuff that you were passionate about, which translate to me as you're bringing your A game because you really want to do well. And when I think many people in our audience are listening, how do I be strategic and map a path to, say, a corporate board seat? And you think, well, I probably need some experience. So maybe a nonprofit is the way to go. One of the things I always advise is go work with an organization that you are passionate about, because you will do the best you can because you're so excited about it. And look what happened with your story. People you were working with were impressed. They saw your skills. They saw what you brought, and they thought, I need this in my organization. Can you expand upon that? You've probably seen people at some of the organizations that you've worked with on the nonprofits that may not have been a fit, and therefore you've made a judgment about them. What are your thoughts on this topic?
Yeah, look, I agree, and I think it's, kind of cliche to somewhat say that it's like, follow your passion, but in all honesty, I think that's very true. If you follow your passion and you love what you do, it doesn't feel like work. You want to pour your heart and your soul and your mind into it. And when you're around people that are doing the same thing, it's contagious, it's infectious, and it just really elevates the collaboration level. It elevates everything from development, fundraising, working with shareholders, investors, everything. They can sense that. And I think what happens is, what I've learned when I've invested in companies and worked with investors who are looking to invest in my programs, is that they look at the story and they look at the passion first. Does this person have the heart and the fire and the passion in them that I can get behind them. And I think donors and shareholders want to see that, but more importantly, you can feel it in the boardroom and your staff can feel it as well. And that's what's important, making sure that the team that is working day to day knows that the board is there because they are passionate, they are true to the cause, they believe in the mission, and they will do anything they can to help the organization succeed, whether it's nonprofit or for-profit.
It's interesting when I think about what you're saying on one of the boards I serve on, the YMCA, one of the 30 largest in the country. It is just every time we go to a board meeting, my heart is touched in different ways, thinking about all the different great good we're doing out there. And you want to share that and be telling people about that and helping an organization like that. And if you just join a board because you're eager to do that and be helpful, that's a great thing. And it sounds like from your experience, Vipe, that just sort of opened up your eyes to thinking, ooh, I like this stuff. I want to do more of this now, as opposed to being sort of tactical and going, I will go do this and it will then let me do the other thing. And that's probably partly why you had such good results. Would you agree?
Absolutely. I was eager to not only contribute my experience and knowledge and be helpful to the organization and the other board members, but I was also learning so much during these experiences. And I think that learning from me is what helped me grow to become what I would say a very effective board member. It's why I've been asked to serve as chairman of an organization or vice chairman or even be put in charge of selling a $145 million portfolio. I've been able to capture all of that and use it to help organizations succeed. But like I said earlier, I've also immensely benefited from these experiences, and it's helped me grow personally and professionally.
But to be very clear, you weren't just going in and just showing up and doing what you could do. I'd love if you could expand upon what you were sharing with me, that when you join a board, you start by writing down, I think it was 1, 3, 5, and 10-year plan for the organization, trying to figure out what you can do while you're there to ensure the mission or the business is prepared for the future. That sounds like a very strategic goal for how you bring your best to help the organization succeed. Perhaps you can share with us more.
Yeah, I take board service very seriously, and I think a lot of board members do as well. I just approach it differently. I look at it in the way that this is an organization who has entrusted me to be part of this team, and I have to come in ready to contribute. So for me, as soon as I come in, I start doing my homework. I request 2 years of board notes, meeting minutes, everything that I can, financial statements, because I want to get up to speed to see what have the last 2 years look like. So when I go into that first board meeting, I have a sense of what the past 2 years has looked like. And I also start talking with the board members as well pretty quickly. I want to know each one of them, why they're there, what they see are the challenges or the opportunities, and then I try and craft what is my contribution to this over the time that I will be here. And I start mapping out a 1, 3, 5, and 10-year goal for not only what I want to contribute, but what I can do to help the organization, but also what can I do to help set up the organization for the long term as well. How do I recruit other board members? How do I think about strategic planning and investing in ideas and programs, and start keeping an eye out for potential collaborations and partners and alliances that might benefit the organization based on the CEO's vision, the discussions in the boardroom, and the strategic plan. So I really come in ready to play in a boardroom, and that's where I feel like my creativity is the best. I'm listening first and I'm talking last. And I find that is the best place for a person like me to be and to contribute wholly within the boardroom.
That's a very interesting point you made there at the end, with lots of them really, but the last one about your talk time ratio and the way I would tend to think about it. And you can see this if someone's a new board member, right? So imagine everybody around the table is all very smart. They're very dedicated. They want to add their value. No one should be dominating the talk time for the most part, because everybody needs to contribute. There's only so much time to cover on an issue. And I liken it to a baseball game of how many times in a normal game, in a normal year, would you get up to bat? 3, 4, probably something like that. you don't get to ask too many questions during a board meeting. So you're trying to be thoughtful and engaging upon it. But also, it depends what the makeup is of the other board members and the skills that they bring, the experience that they have. Maybe you could talk about that from the other perspective. You and I were sharing before you went on air that as the chairman of one of your boards now from the Ocean Institute, you are populating a board. So now you're on the other side. You're selecting rather than being selected. How does your previous experience inform what you're doing now?
Yeah, it's a little different now because obviously the pandemic has changed everything. We had, come January 2020, earlier this year, we had a strategic plan that we were rolling out. We had it set, it was approved, everything. March 30th, that plan was thrown out the window. Everything changed completely, and we were going day to day as to what is happening with our operations. What are we doing? How are we going to survive this? And what do we look like when we come out of things? So for me, it's changed drastically over the last 6 months, the way that I look at the board and the organization to what I see today and what I see down the line. So there's a lot of responsibility as chairman, and part of it that's happened for me is playing advisor and coach to our CEO to let them know that the entire board is behind her. We need to make sure that she knows that she is not alone in this process of navigating our future, and she has done an incredible job. I have a daily conversation with her that's probably more than what most boards do with their chair and CEO, but with CEO here, I have an open dialogue with them on a daily basis. We talk about a lot of things at a high level, and for me, it's understanding what are the resources that she needs in order to ensure success for this institution. So I listen to that, I take it in, and I share that message with our existing board members, let them know what I need from them. I work with them to kind of put some goals together. But earlier this year in March, as this whole pandemic was coming down, I go into my first board meeting, and right out of the gate I say, my goal is to add 6 new board members to our organization by the end of the year. And that got a lot of folks motivated. It energized them, saying there's new blood coming in. There's going to be a healthy future. Our CEO got really excited as well. It wasn't holding back and pulling back and saying, let's hunker down. It's like, let's hunker down, but let's also get the skill set that we need on the board as well.
And, I don't believe any crisis should be wasted. They all present an opportunity, and sometimes that's an organization could move forward in a way they couldn't have before because there's so much more impetus to do something now. And when I step back and I see the way that, in one way, the world has changed after this crisis, is you look at what people are talking about in pollution around cities and seeing how that's changed. So I think there is an opportunity now, probably knowing your heart for the ocean and the planet, to change the dialogue and perhaps the focus about how people are doing things. I imagine as you talked about throwing out your strategy and building the new one, that's coming into play, and would love to hear from someone who's got an insight and focused take on the health of the world, what you're doing in this time and space.
Yeah, look, for us, I believe that, we have to lead in our space, and that is in the ocean education and conservation space. We have to lead in this space because there's a lot of organizations out there, but what can we do to make a difference? Give you an example. Pre-pandemic, we were the largest employer in Dana Point. So we had a responsibility to our community, to the businesses and the local folks that live in the area. Post-pandemic, we went down to about 49 people staff-wise. So we had a big cut in our operations because of the pandemic. But we also understand what our contribution is to the local community and the local economy. So we have had to work with local businesses, elected members of our community, and also local congressional leaders as well, of navigating what role can we play in the big picture of what's happening out there. So for me, it's having conversations with folks in our business community, the folks that live in the area, the folks who are elected to represent these communities, what can we do? So there are a lot of conversations taking place that would probably not be taking place in a regular or a standard nonprofit. So that's been a little bit different for us, I would say. We haven't done this as much in the past, but now we are having to really play a bigger role in our community. And I think it's been good for us. We've had a lot of folks in the community rally behind us. Fundraising has been great, but also collaborations and opportunities like that are coming out quite regularly. There's a lot of people who want to work with us. But we also look at it and say, it's not just the business community. Obviously, recently, there's been this very passionate movement around social justice, and what role do we play in that as well? And we've taken that up also as something that we've put into our mission and our operations as well, of diversity, inclusion, and equity, but also social justice as well.
Now, Vipe, you are an expert, as we talked about in the beginning, on branding and marketing. And I don't want to move from social justice to this and make this sound strange, but taking the new focus on the planet and health, the environment, there is an opportunity for not only for the boards and the organizations you're working with to do that, but just individuals in general. And something I've been thinking about, you and I first connected on LinkedIn. And I believe LinkedIn is a platform that people can use to build their position of authority, to show their expertise, to show what they're excited about. I know you've done that. I've seen that with your space. I would love if you could give us some thoughts about how individuals who maybe started looking at your platform and your history of success and saying, okay, I can do that. I can find my niche and I can go and be really good at it and connect with the right organizations. And perhaps I'm playing the long game, build the right network, and that grows and develops. LinkedIn is a way that most of us can wrap our head around, thinking I can network this way or certainly connect with more people. What are your sort of professional recommendations around this?
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of LinkedIn. It has been really good for me, and I've seen people use it very well to their benefit, and I've also seen people not figure out how to use it as well and kind of stumble a little bit. But I think it is a phenomenal platform to build your thought leadership, share your opinion, and your voice. I think that's been really important. If you want to find your way into a boardroom, whether it's a nonprofit or a corporate boardroom, I think building your thought leadership voice on LinkedIn is a great way to start. Start sharing stories that you feel are important to be heard. Weigh in with commentary. Comment on other people's posts as well. It's a virtual/digital way of networking, and it can have incredible results. And I'll give you an example. About a year and a half ago, I was asked to testify before members of Congress on the harms of offshore oil drilling, but also why the ocean is critical to our business communities along our coast. Traveled to Washington, D.C., but before I went, I put up a few posts on LinkedIn to tell people what I was doing and why I was doing it. And that post got over 56,000 views. So, there's a powerful platform there. People shared the story. They asked me questions. I posted the testimony afterwards, and I got so much engagement from that. So I think LinkedIn is a great place. If you can't network physically, especially in this day and age, with the pandemic going on, it makes it a little bit more difficult. Zoom calls, you can only do so much networking on Zoom. I would highly recommend people using LinkedIn. And even if you're an aspiring board member wanting to get onto a board down the line, or an existing board member, I think it's a great place to share important thoughts and ideas to open up the idea of collaboration in building a community.
Well, there's no question it's a tool that can be used, and we think about tactical as well as strategic ways that people begin to think about how do they position themselves, because as someone who's filling board seats now, you're probably and at least in your head, if not physically on paper, you've got a skills matrix. I need to find these sorts of people to fit into these sorts of slots. And I'm sure you ask your trusted network, but for some organizations are also using LinkedIn as a great tool to get out there. So just improving not only what you're saying in terms of your ability to put thought leadership out there, but what your profile says about you and how you want to proceed. I know yours is very carefully crafted, a board executive, business strategist, and philanthropist, because it opens up those conversations for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I get people reaching out to me all the time wanting to just have a chat. I love networking. It's a great way to make new contacts. I have great, thoughtful conversations with folks. I learn a lot, but I'm also, because of my board passion, I'm also creating a list of potential board members as well. And that's what I've done. I've reached into my network over the last 20 years and pulled people from my network saying, this is the exact type of person that I need on my board right now, and I'll reach out to them. And, surprisingly, they'll say, I've always wanted to join a board, but I didn't know how to go about it. Thank you so much for thinking about me. I would love to explore this. And I guide them into the process. And I've probably helped about a half a dozen or so people find board seats in the groups that I work with or have worked with in the past. And it's fun. I love seeing the opportunity to put people in a position where their expertise can be utilized for something bigger.
And I think that's a great way to describe it, because I know from previous discussions that a lot of people don't necessarily know what they're getting into with the boards as much as we might talk about. I know that was your case. You would say you didn't completely understand it. And I believe you thought it was just basically oversight and offering feedback when you were asked, right? And as we've talked about today, there's so much more to it than that. But do you have any sort of one or two other key lessons learned we didn't get to today that you wish everybody knew as they go down this journey?
Yeah, I think for me, the biggest thing was understanding, finding my place in the boardroom and finding my voice. I think sometimes what I have seen is people come into a board position, and for the first year, maybe year and a half, they're not speaking up or speaking out as much. They're waiting to kind of find their stride and their rhythm. And I would encourage people to, start talking to all the board members right out of the gate, get access to the minutes and the meeting notes and everything, and just start preparing for interacting in the boardroom as quickly as possible. If you've been asked to serve on the board, you're qualified to be in the room, you're qualified to speak up, you're qualified to work with a CEO or the leadership to help the organization.
Well, Vipe, we were delighted to have you on the show today, and thank you for sharing your insights and helping all of us to be boardroom bound.
Thank you so much for having me, Alexander. Really enjoyed being here with you.
That's it for this episode of Boardroom Bound. I really enjoyed chatting with Vipe Desi. It was great to hear an example of someone who was just trying to go help the world, and literally help the world, because he's so eager to help the oceans and the planets and the environment, just going to do his job helping the world, and how using his specific skill set translated across. And of course, it was great fun just to hear the stories. This is someone whose work inspired the X Games and helped launch Red Bull in the US, and how all of that came about to also lead into for-profit board company roles, plus as someone who's now the chairman of a board populating board seats today, what that looks and feels like on the other side. Now, if you head over to podcast.gordon.edu, you will find links to everything that we talked about today. And please know that the Boardroom Bound team and I are so proud to be your go-to podcast for all things that connect, prepare, and empower you to land a board seat. Be sure to subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss any of the high-quality content that we're bringing to you every Wednesday. Thanks for joining me today. I can't wait to share more stories and strategies from brilliant business minds with you again next week. Remember to keep tuning in to be Boardroom Bound.